All right. Hello, everyone. Thanks for joining me. This is the first segment in what will be a series of ones where, in a format I've decided upon for giving any other sort of type tips or advice that I have that I can think of based on 20 years of just being so just it's sick, really, the level of fascination I have with the Myers-Briggs Temperament Indicator and all the time that I put into it, and the hundreds and hundreds of hours I've spent talking about it with people and testing it out with at least 200. I don't even know, like more people than I can possibly count. I am an ENFP. I know a lot of people. There are a lot of people coming through my life all the time, and anyway, so I had to do something with all of this material, and this channel is it so far. All right. Anyway, so I wanted to give some more type tips, and the format that I decided upon that I thought would be good is one in which I make reference to a specific type and what are some characteristics of that I could expect to be true, or characteristics there would be that would attend the self-typing process and difficulties of someone of a particular type. And then what I'm going to do is relate those qualities to such and such a type's dominant function and their inferior function. Not because there aren't a whole lot of other things that can be said about the other cognitive functions and way more depth you can go into, but just that for this, for the sake of time and manageability, I think that we can, by looking at those cognitive functions in a given type, we can really predict a great deal about where they are likely to run aground in their self-typing process, and what their blind spots are going to be. I think it's quite predictable in a lot of ways. It can be explained. And then last, what I'll do in the segment is I'm going to, after describing all of this stuff, then I'm going to offer some questions that I think would be good in helping such and such a type that I've been speaking of, help them differentiate themselves from some of the other likely contenders that they've been entertaining, that they've likely been entertaining as possible types for themselves. And I'll explain why all of that is as well. So the first one this is sort of premised upon to the idea of what I would call like the cognitive, this is what I've been calling it to myself so far, the cognitive function paradox. And it is this, there are all kinds of vloggers and experts and people who are trying to help people with their self-typing out there for the Myers-Briggs Temperament Indicator, who are really underlining the importance of becoming very knowledgeable about the Jungian typology, cognitive functions, as the very first and most fundamental step to self-typing, and also in assisting others with typing, if that's what you want to do, and you're invited to do so. And I think that's very, very sound advice, and that is essential to get into that stuff at some point. But here's one thing though, like what my segments here, what they're going to be seeking to address are the sort of the problems of people who have already done that, and they're still having trouble, and they still haven't arrived at any sort of conclusion or rest or peace as to, they still want to know what their type is, and they haven't been able to figure it out yet. My little segments are for those people. So this cognitive function paradox I speak of is the one in which here's the thing. While I think that that is terrific advice to become knowledgeable about the cognitive functions, and then try and, for example, use a method where you perhaps will figure out what your dominant cognitive function is, and then from that begin the process of deducing what the other ones would be. Again, great idea, good idea, and absolutely should be done or should be attempted. But there are a few predictable problems I can see with that, however. And maybe where I part ways with some people is that I don't agree that is exclusively how you should arrive at typing, how you should go about typing yourself. If the first method of learning about the cognitive functions and trying to observe yourself, if that hasn't worked for you after some, very well thought out and energetic efforts in that area, if it's has still not helped you get to what your type is, and you either will not or cannot consult with a certified practitioner who could really guide you through the process and give you some informed, experienced worthwhile guidance through that assessment process. If you're still going to be going it alone, then I think that you might run, there's a pretty good potential for a lot of people to still run aground and still not be able to get very far, even if they do study the cognitive functions and understand all of that stuff very well and spend a lot of energy and time trying to examine themselves. And this is because quite predictably, there are, according to our cognitive functions, which ones we have and the hierarchy in which they're organized and the interplay of all of those, each type is going to predictably have a certain blind spots or certain areas that they're not as strong at evaluating. They're not as strong at observing, and they're not as strong at evaluating either. And that's where I feel that outside indicators can be very, very useful, if not essential, to the process. And that's why I do not recommend going it totally alone with this stuff. In fact, I think that's really, really stupid. If you really do want to find your correct type, and if going into the cognitive functions really deeply and knowledgeably and really trying that avenue hasn't helped you yet, I think it's really dumb to not, and I've gone into that in other videos as to why that is, to not get outside input or assistance with that. That would be like qualified, knowledgeable outside assistance. So, blah, 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 blah. Now, I've chosen INTP for this one because, I guess because, again, I'm paying special attention to the IN types. I do because there are just so many of them in my life. You can see my other videos about all of that, how that came to be and why it is and what my actual experience is in that. But yeah, briefly, INTPs. My dad's an INTP. My brother's an INTP. All of my boyfriends have been INTPs, and a great number of close friends within my extensive ENFP social network are also INTPs. So I got a whole lot of INTP running through my entire middle-aged life. And for this and then plus the fact that because of that social experience, I've made special reference and done special studying in, really looking into what INTPs are all about in terms of my book learning about it. I know a lot about INTPs, let's put it that way. So again, doesn't mean you should listen to me, but I do think I have a few things to say that are worth hearing for those who are wanting any sort of assistance with their typing, their self-typing, who might be INTPs. So, or wondered about it. Now, let's go into some characteristics. I'm going to list off a bunch of characteristics that I've noticed, again, in real life experience and going like, being party to some INTPs as they've gone about trying to do a self-assessment with the MBTI or MBTI-like materials. Now, these qualities these sort of what I would call harbingers that you might very well be an INTP. I do not mean to imply that if you have any one of these characteristics, or if you identify with any one of these characteristics or behaviors or whatever, that you are an INTP, nor am I implying that if you don't have any of them, that you can't be an INTP. Not saying that at all. Not at all. What I am saying is that if after hearing all these different items on my list, you find that you identify with several of them, then I would suggest to you that you maybe give a little more weight in your investigative process, your self-examination for typing in the MBTI. I would suggest that you maybe weigh the possibility that you're an INTP, privilege that one a little bit and see where that gets you. So, like, go deeper into that one. Because I think these are quite meaningful cues if there are many of them in evidence in a given person's situation. So they are as follows. Okay. Are you convinced that, and again, what's really hilarious and kind of ridiculous and hilarious about what I'm about to say is that I'm actually talking about the blind spots. So, I'm doing my best, guys. I'm doing my best, but it may well be the case that these actually do all apply to you, but because they're your blind spots, you are the last person to see them. So this is really, I guess you should be listening to what I'm about to say, if you can, to the extent that you can. Think about, has anyone in your life who's been privy to this process, this assessment process, do you think they would say this about you? Or have they, in fact, said this about you? Can others validate that point of view at all? And have they have they tried their damnedest and, still come up, gotten nowhere with you? INTPs. Note number 1, the most independently minded of all 16 of the types. So there are certain outstanding qualities that have to do with INTP that could, in a quite hilarious and ironic fashion, become the most gigantic stumbling blocks to INTPs figuring out what their type is. And I'm even going to, again, the troll fest that's likely to follow be damned. I will even go so far as to say that based on what I've seen in my face-to-face life with the INTPs I know and love, and they're going through their process, and me being a part of it, and what I've also seen online with all these people that to me could not more obviously be exemplifying, like 20 outstanding characteristics of INTP ways of thinking and approaching things, who are absolutely clueless as to how very likely it is that they're INTPs. I'm starting to think that maybe INTPs might, CF my video about, for the creative thinking introverts, why, I'm wondering why aren't they better at typing themselves in general. It's all in general. I'm really starting to wonder, because it just, the evidence just keeps coming in. It keeps coming in. That maybe INTPs are the very worst. Like maybe they take the gold cup in being the absolute worst at typing, and typing themselves most of all. I don't know. Of course, we will not ever be able to prove this, so that could be garbage. I'm just saying that I'm going to tell you some things that I've seen. All right, here we go. So, are you? Are you convinced that you have certain qualities, you have certain characteristics, as pertains to the MBTI types and what is under consideration? Are you really convinced that you have qualities that no one else has ever commented to you that you have, but you've arrived at it? Like, that it's true, but when asked if you can come up with any sort of exterior support for this idea that you are this way, you can't think of a single person or a single time that someone has said that you are blah, but that you are. Have there been any disjunctions between, again, self-perception and what the environment, what kind of feedback the environment is giving to you about that? I think, again, does this constitute, oh yeah, you're an INTP? No. Does this mean that all INTPs could, have encountered this? No. I'm just saying that it's a question, so please bear with me, and we'll look at a bunch of others. What I'm thinking of as pertains to this one is the fact that all of the all of the NTs, actually, there have been a couple of ENTPs too. All of the NTs that I have been for whose self-assessment for the MBTI I have been party to, we've discussed what their type might be, and I've tried, we've talked about it, and they've asked me stuff, I've told them stuff, told them what I observe, what I think, blah, blah, blah. In several times this has happened that such and such an NT, and including INTs, have been very convinced that that part of the reason why they're so confused about whether they're actually INTPs is that they in fact are very emotionally sensitive people. To which I have to just suppress the laughter, because here's what usually happens. What I do is I'll say to them is like, well, okay, so you're very emotionally sensitive, and I say I understand that you have feelings and that you feel things deeply and your feelings get hurt and so on. But I said, if you were to understand, and I'm like sort of putting it in brackets, the way the rest of the world understands, if you understand emotional sensitivity to mean that not emotional sensitivity, being emotionally sensitive, being a sensitive person, that being someone who's aware of their own feelings being hurt and being deeply hurt, that does not qualify you for being a sensitive person at all. What I think in most cases what people are talking about when they say a sensitive person, they mean, do you find it very, very easy? Does it come naturally to you to imagine, to have strong empathy and imagine vividly, have a virtual reality performance inside yourself, taking informational cues, to be able to kind of reproduce inside yourself the feeling states of others, and quite easily and automatically and often and with great accuracy know how other people are feeling, and not only know how other people are feeling in a sort of informational sense, but that you yourself are feeling the feelings that, or something very similar to what they are feeling, and find that just a snap to do. Are you quite easily moved to tears because the imaginings you have of another person's feeling state are so vivid that they cause you to weep? That's what an emotionally sensitive person is. And usually when I say that, and I'm like, do you identify with that? The INT here who's just been speaking to, who I think is an INT, who's just been speaking to me, they go, oh, because they haven't, not only do they almost never do that, but it didn't even occur to them to, because that is not their bag. Like, again, the most intelligent people walking around out there. So many of them are INTs, but yeah, this is not their area. This is not their area. This is not what they spend, half of every day thinking about. They're thinking about a lot of other things. So next, do you have a kind of either obliviousness or to external cues as could pertain to your typing, your self-typing? Are you has it not occurred to you to consider sort of external cues in the environment or behavioral cues as to what your preferences are on the 4 preference scales in the Myers-Briggs Temperament Indicator, or as pertains to your Jungian cognitive functions upon which that system is based? Are you is that really has that not been much of a consideration for you in your self-typing investigative process? Or has it been the case that you have noticed behavioral cues, or you've looked at sort of evidence in the environment or what other people have told you about what you're like and so on, but you were you quite quickly just were dispensed with that? Like, you were like, yeah, that's not really worth looking at. That's not worth considering. Or certainly not anywhere near as heavily as my abstract, deep, super complex abstract thinking about the abstract concepts, and completely unproven as well, like in the sort of scientific sense, of the cognitive functions. Like, is that like the big thing for you? And as for stuff like how messy your room is, or like how much you drive people crazy with your chronic lateness, or whatever, like all these other cues that might indicate, say, J or P stuff, you're totally ignoring that stuff. You're like, you have no time to consider any of that. Okay, moving on. Next other possible signs that you maybe should consider INTP a little bit more heavily among the possibilities of which types you are. Have you been heavily researching? Are you one of the most theoretically knowledgeable people around when it comes to the MBTI and the cognitive functions? And are you months into the process, or if not years? I'm actually serious, like, if not years into the process of trying to figure out what your type is, and you've only, in all of that time and with all of that strenuous research and reflection and cogitative effort, have you still only narrowed it down to about 4 types, to about 4 contenders? Like, you're nowhere. It's been a while since you got any closer to just one. That would be another clue to me that if in evidence with a whole bunch of other cues and clues, that maybe you should really consider if you're an INTP. Now, the next one is going to apply to all of the introverts. It totally will, but it's going to apply to people who are INTP, especially, to an especially remarkable degree. Did you hold out as long as you possibly could before seeking any sort of outside input into your evaluation process? Or are you like way into your evaluation process, and you still are extremely loath to talk to anybody else about what you're like, or what they see about you, or what they think, what their opinions are about what your preferences probably are, or whatever, any sort of input at all? Have you been extremely reluctant to pay any attention to, what other people might say about what your preferences are? Or have you held out as long as possible, and then you did seek the opinion of a bunch of people whose intelligence and knowledge base you respect about this matter, but once they all gave it their absolute best shot, and like put a shit ton of energy into trying to help you with this, you ultimately discounted everything they said in favor of pursuing your own doubts. This one I'm pausing, because I've seen some INTPs do this. Oh my God. So far of all the things I've mentioned, this one is it's not a smoking gun, but it is much closer than the other ones are to like INTP-ishness. Okay. Again, not exclusively INTP kind of behavior attitude, but wow, is it ever a hallmark though? All right. Through this whole self-investigative process, have you been frequently, if not consistently, continually, uneasy about the fact that this entire model that you're trying to operate within consists of nothing but generalizations, nothing but matters of emphasis, everything is very obviously relativistic within the system, and that all the evaluation for it relies on things that cannot be exact, cannot be precise, cannot be figured out according to any kind of binary system of logical processing. Have you found this to be irritating, or has it made you very, very uncomfortable, and has it deepened your already remarkable skepticism and taken it to a stratospheric level that even you thought, that surprises even you? Again, not that only INTPs could this happen to, but I am saying that this would happen to, of all the types, this would happen to more INTPs than any of the others. Yes, absolutely.